Yeah, Jared, over the last decade or so, or maybe even longer than that, Canada has become more environmentally conscious. What are some of the things that CP has implemented, or some things that they're working on that would come in down the road?
That's a good question, and clearly protecting the environment is paramount to Canadians and to everyone around the world. And CP is a strong protector of an innovator in that vein. We consider locomotive fuel efficiency to be the most important element of both operating cost efficiently and reducing our carbon footprint. Our drive for efficiency and emissions reduction focuses on improving fuel economy for our locomotive fleet and our freight transportation operations. So since 1990, our locomotive fuel efficiency has improved 43%. In 2019, our fuel efficiency was 10.5% lower than the North American Class 1 freight railway average. And we're very excited to note that earlier in November of 2020, we were recognized, CP was recognized for leadership sustainability and named to the 2020 Dow Jones Sustainability Index in North America. And we're continuing that with development of things like a hydrogen-powered locomotive. And even at our head office in Calgary, we installed a solar farm above the parking lot so that people park their cars under the solar panels, and the solar panels provide the power for the head office.
See, I'm a train guy. I think trains are pretty dang cool. So hearing about hydrogen and hearing about the 8,500 foot cars and all the investments that CP has put in, especially in the last the last 5 years, there's been lots of money spent by CP when it comes to capital X projects. So as a farmer, obviously that's a good thing.
Yeah, we spend typically about, this year we'll spend $1.55 billion on CapEx. A lot of that goes back into the plant. You'd be hard pressed, I think, to find an industry that spends as much back into its plant of its annual revenue on an annual basis than railroads do. Quite often we spend about 20% of our revenue back into refurbishing the plant. And a lot of that, like I said, goes into track, infrastructure, locomotives, and cars, but it also goes into new technology that we have that we're developing for safety and reliability. And so we have things like cold wheel technology that we've developed where we've always had hot wheel technology detectors. So if a train goes by a detector, it detects if there's a hot wheel, it knows if there's a mishap with the wheel. But we also have cold wheel technology. So when a train is going down a grade, the detector checks if the brakes are heating up, and it'll tell or if the wheel is heating up, and it'll tell if the brakes are working properly. And what this allows us to do is perform maintenance on a proactive basis so that we can ensure the reliability of the cars that are moving grain. And then we have less bad orders en route, which is going to improve our winter operations. And we're always looking at technologies like that to improve our reliability.
We talk about CapEx expenditures, and you said 1.55 billion. That's a pretty substantial number. When we're talking about grain movement, what are some of the pinch points that need to be remedied?
Let me just think this through. The things we're doing to drive efficiency at CP, obviously, is investing in 5,900 new hopper cars that can carry more grain per hopper car and are shorter, so we can actually get more cars on a train, up to 147 cars on a single train, 8,500 foot train. And what this allows us to do is move more grain per train, up to 44% more grain per train than the typical 112 car model. And then we can empty elevators faster to allow more grain to come up the driveway and get it to port faster where they can load it on vessels. So what we're trying to do is eliminate the pinch points by moving more grain in a single movement, allowing that way to move more grain in the peak when the farmers want to move it.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Like I said, some of the investments, like the bigger cars and and loop tracks in Western Canada are playing dividends in the last year. And, 2020, 21 was a pretty dang good year for moving grain by the railroads.
It was, and we only want to get better. We set a number of records last year, and we want to continue to move more grain. And you mentioned the loop tracks. Our 8,500 foot HEP train product allows us to take an 8,500 foot train and move it into an elevator. And if it's a loop track, we pull the train into the loop. Our crew gets off. The elevator crew gets on the train, pulls it through the elevator loop in under 16 hours. The train is loaded. That crew gets off. Our crew comes back, gets on the train, and it departs within 20 hours, and it's on its way to port. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a loop track. We also have elevators or grain companies have elevators within Western Canada that are ladder track, that are similar operation, where we pull up with the train on an 8,500 foot lead. Our crew gets off, elevator crew gets on. They switch the train through their elevator and load it. They put it back on the lead, and our crew comes and gets on and departs for the port. And that's how we're developing, again, more efficiency in the grain supply chain so that we can deliver more grain.
Right. That the power on model is a little bit of a game changer, because even though the rail has been around for over 100 years now in Canada, we have a tough time moving grain in the winter. So that's one thing that will definitely pay dividends, I feel, as a farmer.
Oh, it's an excellent point. Yeah, power on allows us to keep the air in the train. Obviously, trains, people may not know. I say obviously, people may not know that rail cars operate on air brakes, and the locomotives have to pump the air completely through the train. When you have a train that's 8,500 feet long, obviously that takes a lot in the winter. When it gets below minus 25, that air can start to leak out of the hoses, which requires us to shorten the trains. If we can keep the power on the trains, then it's easier to depart and ensure that the entire train is aired up and ready to go. The way our product works at CP is that we work with the grain companies to determine what they plan to ship over the crop year, and then we allocate our trains based on that. And each grain company, their trains through the dedicated train product, it's called the dedicated train product because those trains become dedicated to them. And they cycle those trains back and forth between their elevators at the port. And we have a weekly process where they tell us where they want the trains to go once they're unloaded, and we launch them out of the port and take them to those elevators. And that's how we manage our product. So it's very closely knit with our customers so that we are allocating the product to the needs and operating it as efficiently as we can in working with them to move the trains to the right elevators.
Right. It's called a supply chain for a reason. Farmer delivers to the elevator puts it on a train, and then it goes on a boat.
Yeah.
So everyone plays.
As I described, we're continually working on our outreach at all levels, from the grain companies to the farmers. Can you tell me, what is it that farmers are most concerned about today? And what can we do as a railroad to make grain shipping better for the entire industry?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jarad. I think there's a lot of misinformation and misconceptions in the farming community, maybe that we don't realize what happens and why it happens, and talks like this bring out some of the reasons why the train didn't come today, maybe because it was too cold, and this is why it was too cold, and this is what they're trying to do about it. I think performance overall in my farming career over the last 15 years, I would say that CP and CN have done an okay job, but 2020, 2021 gives me some hope that maybe we're on the right trajectory, that grain is important and grain will get moved. Essentially, it has to get moved on time so I get the most money in my pocket. And I think maybe we're at the point where I can say the railroads are doing a fine job.
Great. Yeah, we want to do a better than fine job is our goal. We've set a number of records in grain movement over the last year, and we have no intent on slowing down. Our intent is to continue to move more grain in the coming crop year than we did in the last, and hopefully meet the needs of the entire supply chain in Canada.
Right, and as a farmer, we're going to try to grow that crop and put that challenge to you guys. What role do producer cars have at CP?
Producer cars at CP are one of the options we offer in our suite of products and services, starting with the dedicated train product. Producer cars fit into that open distribution, less than train load product offering, and a producer or a smaller company can order cars into those sites and we'll serve them. As I stated earlier, the dedicated train product has grown to move about 85% of the grain we move in a crop year. So the producer car sites, while they still exist across Western Canada, have shrunk, I think, over the probably last decade in the amount they get used.